"You're still my first option," she said, applying her mascara in the bathroom mirror without even looking at me. Still, as if I should be grateful for that qualifier. We'd been arguing about priorities again. I'd asked her to skip tonight's girls' night because my brother was visiting from out of state, and I thought it would be nice to have dinner together as a family. Her response? A laugh that could freeze hell over, followed by that devastating statement that just redefined our entire marriage in 4 words. I stood there watching her get ready. This woman I'd been married to for 6 years, and suddenly felt like I was looking at a stranger. The red dress she was putting on wasn't one I recognized. The perfume she sprayed was different from what she usually wore around me. Even her makeup seemed more intentional tonight. "First option," I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. That's interesting phrasing. She finally turned to look at me, irritation flashing in her eyes. "Don't start with your jealous husband routine tonight. I'm going out with the girls, not running away to Vegas." I didn't say anything about being jealous. "I'm just curious about this ranking system you apparently have for the people in your life." She rolled her eyes and grabbed her purse from the dresser. "You know what I meant. Don't twist my words." But I didn't know what she meant. That was the problem. In her mind, I was still her first choice, implying that she had been weighing other options. The fact that she felt the need to use the word "still" meant those options were very much active and being considered. "So what happens when I stop being your first option?" I asked, my voice calm but direct. "Do I get a notification, or do I just figure it out when you don't come home one night?" She paused, her hand on the bedroom door handle. For a moment, I thought she might actually engage with the seriousness of what she'd just said. Instead, she gave me that condescending smile I'd been seeing more often lately. "You're being dramatic. I'm going to meet the girls at that new wine bar downtown. I'll be back by midnight." "The girls," I said, watching her face carefully. "Would those be the same girls who've been divorced twice and spend their weekends on dating apps?" Her jaw tightened. "My friends' relationship statuses have nothing to do with me, right? Because spending every Friday night with women who treat marriage like a subscription service they can cancel anytime couldn't possibly influence your perspective on commitment." She opened the door, but turned back one more time. "You used to be fun. You used to trust me. Now you sound like my father." And with that parting shot, she was gone. I heard her heels clicking down the hallway, the jingle of her keys, and then the sound of the front door closing behind her. The house fell silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the empty doorway. 6 years of marriage, and I'd just been demoted to first option status. Not the love of her life, not her partner, not even her priority, just her current best choice among apparently several alternatives. The worst part wasn't even the words themselves. It was how easily they'd come out of her mouth, like she'd been thinking them for a while. This wasn't a slip of the tongue or something said in anger. This was her honest assessment of where I stood in her life. I walked to the bathroom and looked at myself in the same mirror where she'd been applying her makeup minutes earlier. When had I become someone who could be casually dismissed? When had I started accepting being treated like a backup plan in my own marriage? My phone buzzed with a text from my brother asking what time we were meeting for dinner. I stared at the message, realizing I was about to tell him that his sister-in-law's girls' night took priority over family time. Again, but as I started typing a response, a different feeling began building in my chest. Not the familiar resignation I'd been carrying around lately, but something sharper. Something that felt suspiciously like self-respect awakening from a long sleep. I deleted the apologetic text I was about to send my brother and wrote something else instead. "Change of plans. Let's make it a guy's night. I've got some thinking to do." If I was just her first option, then maybe it was time she learned what it felt like to be mine. And right now, my first option was figuring out exactly what game she thought she was playing and whether I wanted to keep participating in it. The night was young, and I had a feeling it was about to get very interesting. My brother and I ended up at Buffalo Wild Wings, which seemed fitting since my marriage apparently had all the substance of bar food. Over wings and beer, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years, talking honestly about my relationship. "She said you're her first option?" he asked, nearly choking on his drink. "Dude, that's like saying you're her favorite backup plan." "Yeah, well, apparently that's where I rank these days." But even as we talked, part of my mind was working on something else. Call it curiosity or call it self-preservation, but I needed to understand what was really happening during these girls' nights. They'd become a weekly ritual over the past few months. always with the same vague explanation about needing space to decompress. After dropping my brother back at his hotel, I decided to do some basic reconnaissance. Not because I was paranoid, but because when someone tells you you're their first option, it implies they're actively evaluating other options. The new wine bar she mentioned was easy enough to find. Vintage and Vine, downtown on 5th Street. I drove by around 10:30, just curious. Her car was parked outside, along with 2 others I recognized from her friend group. But there were also several cars I didn't recognize, and through the large front windows, I could see it wasn't exactly the quiet girls' night she'd described. The place was packed. Mixed crowd. Definitely not just a few wives sitting around complaining about their husbands over Chardonnay. I didn't go in. That wasn't my style, and frankly, I didn't need to see whatever was happening inside. But I did notice something interesting. She told me she'd be home by midnight. At 11:45, I was sitting in my car watching her laugh and flirt with some guy in an expensive suit while her girlfriends cheered her on from their high-top table. I drove home and did something I probably should have done months ago. I opened her laptop. Now, before anyone gets their privacy advocacy speech ready, let me be clear. She uses my Netflix account, my Amazon Prime, my Spotify, and half her bills come out of my checking account. If she wanted privacy, she could start by paying for her own subscriptions. Her Instagram told an interesting story. Photos from previous girls' nights showed a pattern I'd somehow missed. Same group of women, but always with different guys in the background. Always at bars or clubs that definitely weren't advertising themselves as places for married women to have innocent conversations about life. But the real eye-opener was her text messages with her friend who was going through her second divorce. Screenshots of conversations dating back weeks, all revolving around how marriage is just a piece of paper and how you don't know what you're missing until you get back out there. One message thread from last weekend made my blood pressure spike. He actually asked me to skip tonight to have dinner with his boring brother. Like, seriously? I'm 28, not 88. I didn't sign up to be a housewife. Another gem. I love him, but sometimes I wonder if I settled too young. There are so many successful guys at these places who actually know how to have fun. And then the kicker, sent just 3 hours ago. Tonight feels different. I'm actually excited to see if he shows up. Wish me luck. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark living room. The pieces were falling into place with uncomfortable clarity. This wasn't about needing space or girl time. This was about her testing the waters while keeping me as her safety net. The front door opened at 1:23 a.m. She tried to be quiet, but her heels on the hardwood floor announced her arrival. I heard her pause in the entryway, probably surprised to see the living room light on. "You're still awake," she said, appearing in the doorway. Her makeup was smudged, her hair slightly disheveled, and she had that guilty look people get when they're caught doing something they know they shouldn't. "Couldn't sleep," I said, my voice neutral. "How was your girls' night?" "Fine. Good. We just talked and had a few drinks." She was avoiding eye contact, which was interesting. "At Vintage and Vine." She froze. "How did you know where we went?" "You told me. Remember? The new wine bar downtown." I hadn't told her I'd driven by, but her reaction told me everything I needed to know about her comfort level with her story. "Right? Yeah, it was nice. Quiet. Quiet," I repeated. "That's surprising. Looked pretty busy when I drove past earlier." The color drained from her face. "You drove past? Why would you do that?" "I was dropping my brother off at his hotel. It's on the way." I stood up and walked closer to her. "But I'm curious about something. You said you'd be home by midnight. It's almost 1:30. We lost track of time. You know how it is when you're having fun." "Fun," I said, letting the word hang between us. "With the girls." "Yes, with the girls." But her voice had that defensive edge that guilty people get when they're sticking to a story they know won't hold up. I nodded slowly. "Well, I'm glad you had fun. I had an interesting evening myself. Did some reading, caught up on some things I'd been meaning to look into." She was watching me carefully now, probably trying to figure out how much I knew. The smart play would have been to press her right then, but I'd learned something important tonight. She was lying to me, but she was also sloppy about it, which meant if I gave her enough rope, she'd probably hang herself without my help. "I'm going to bed," she announced, clearly wanting to escape this conversation. "Good idea. You look tired." I smiled at her, but it wasn't the warm smile she was used to. It was the kind of smile that lets someone know you're thinking things you're not saying yet. As she headed upstairs, I made a mental note to have another conversation with her friend's ex-husband. If I remembered correctly, he discovered his wife's girls' nights were actually auditions for his replacement. Funny how patterns repeat themselves. Even funnier how predictable people become when they think they're being clever. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. Saturday morning arrived with the artificial cheerfulness that guilty people use to overcompensate. She made pancakes, which she hadn't done in months, and kept asking if I wanted more coffee with the kind of enthusiasm typically reserved for game show hosts. "You seem to be in a good mood," I observed, watching her bustle around the kitchen like she was auditioning for Wife of the Year. "Just happy it's the weekend. We should do something fun today. Maybe go to that farmer's market you like." Interesting. Yesterday, I was boring enough that she couldn't sacrifice one evening to have dinner with family. Today, she wanted to spend quality time browsing organic vegetables. The transformation was almost impressive in its transparency. "Actually, I was thinking we should talk about last night." Her smile flickered for just a moment before snapping back into place. "What about it?" "I told you, we just had drinks and caught up." I pulled out my phone and opened the photo I'd taken of her car parked outside Vintage in Vine at 11:45. Then I showed her the timestamp. "This is your car, right? The one that was supposed to leave by midnight, so you could be home on time." She stared at the photo, her face cycling through confusion, anger, and calculation before settling on indignation. "You followed me? Are you serious right now?" "I didn't follow you. I told you. I was taking my brother back to his hotel. But since we're talking about following people, let's discuss your friend's dating adventures." "What are you talking about?" I opened her laptop, which I'd conveniently left on the kitchen counter, and pulled up the text conversation I'd screenshotted the night before. Her face went white as I read her own words back to her. "I love him, but sometimes I wonder if I settled too young. There are so many successful guys at these places who actually know how to have fun." I looked up at her. "Your words, not mine. You went through my messages?" The defensive anger was ramping up, right on schedule. I went through our shared laptop that I pay for, looking at messages sent on the phone plan that I pay for, about nights out that you fund with the credit card that I pay for. I closed the laptop and leaned against the counter. "But sure, let's talk about privacy violations." She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it, probably realizing that playing the victim card wasn't going to work when I had actual evidence. "Those messages don't mean anything. I was just venting to a friend." "Venting," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it when you tell someone you're excited to see if some guy shows up to meet you?" Her face flushed red. "It's not what you think." "Really? Then explain to me what I should think when my wife tells me I'm her first option, then spends the evening flirting with other men while texting about how she might have settled too young." I wasn't flirting with anyone. I pulled out my phone again and showed her another photo. This one I'd taken through the window of the bar, showing her laughing and touching the arm of the man in the expensive suit. Technology is amazing these days. Phone cameras can capture moments from pretty far away. The fight went out of her all at once. She slumped against the kitchen island, looking like someone who'd just realized their poker bluff had been called. "It's not what it looks like," she said quietly. "Then tell me what it is. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're shopping for my replacement while keeping me around as your backup plan." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes, but I noticed they were more frustrated tears than guilty ones. "I just wanted to feel attractive again. Desired. Do you know how long it's been since you looked at me the way those men do? So this is my fault," I said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact about where this conversation was heading. "That's not what I'm saying. Actually, that's exactly what you're saying. You're telling me that because I don't worship the ground you walk on every single day, you've decided to seek validation from strangers at bars. You don't understand what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage." I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. "Invisible? You want to talk about invisible? When's the last time you asked me about my day without checking your phone? When's the last time you initiated any conversation that wasn't about something you wanted or needed? When's the last time you treated me like I was more than just the guy who pays the bills and fixes things around the house?" She didn't have an answer for that, which was an answer in itself. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, my voice calm but absolutely firm. "You're going to stop treating our marriage like it's optional. You're going to stop going to bars to collect phone numbers and ego boosts. And you're going to decide whether you want to be married to me or whether you want to be single and dating again. You can't just give me ultimatums. I'm not giving you an ultimatum. I'm telling you that I'm done being your first option while you keep other options open. You want to feel desired? Then desire the man you married, or set him free to find someone who will." She wiped her eyes, but I could see the anger building behind the tears. So that's it. After 6 years, you're just going to throw our marriage away over some harmless flirting. I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that when you decided I was disposable enough to risk losing over some attention from strangers. I stood up and grabbed my keys from the counter. You've got until I get back from the gym to decide what you want. But understand this. The next conversation we have about your girls' nights is going to be very different. Where are you going? To work out. Apparently, I need to make sure I'm still attractive enough to compete with random guys at wine bars. I headed for the door, but turned back one more time. Oh, and honey, the next time you want to lie to me about where you're going or what you're doing, maybe delete the evidence from the devices I pay for first. The look on her face told me she was finally beginning to understand that the man who used to accept her excuses and believe her stories had left the building. What she didn't know yet was that he wasn't coming back. The real conversation was just getting started. I was at the gym for 2 hours, pushing iron and clearing my head. When I walked back into the house, I could smell something cooking. She was in the kitchen wearing the dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one she claimed was too fancy for everyday wear. "I made your favorite," she announced, gesturing toward what looked like an elaborate dinner spread. "That chicken parmesan you always ask for." The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the defensive woman I'd left behind, replaced by someone who seemed to have stepped out of a marriage counseling handbook titled, "How to Win Back Your Husband in 3 Easy Steps." "Interesting timing," I said, grabbing a water bottle from the fridge. "I've been thinking about what you said. You're right. I haven't been the wife you deserve." I sat down at the kitchen table and watched her bustle around, plating food with the kind of attention to detail she usually reserved for her Instagram photos. "And what exactly have you concluded from all this thinking? That I've been selfish, that I've been taking you for granted." She sat across from me, reaching for my hand. "I want to fix this. Fix us. By making dinner? By being honest." She took a deep breath, like she was preparing for a performance. "Yes, I've been enjoying the attention from other men, but it never went anywhere. It was just fantasy, like watching a movie or reading a romance novel." I pulled my hand away and started cutting into the chicken. "Fantasy. That's one way to describe emotional cheating." "It wasn't cheating. I never did anything physical." "Right. You just told your divorced friend that you were excited to see if some specific guy would show up to meet you. Totally innocent fantasy." Her composure cracked slightly. "How do you even know about that?" "Because you're not as careful as you think you are. And because when someone tells me I'm their first option, I tend to investigate what the other options might be." She was quiet for a moment, regrouping. When she spoke again, her voice had taken on that wounded tone that she usually deployed when she needed to flip a script. "I can't believe you're punishing me for being human, for having moments of doubt in a 6-year marriage. Everyone has those thoughts. Do they? Because I've been married to you for 6 years, and not once have I told you that you're my first option while secretly shopping around for upgrades. That's because you're a man. It's different for women. We need to feel desired, appreciated. When was the last time you brought me flowers just because? When was the last time you planned a surprise date?" And there it was, the pivot I'd been expecting. Somehow, her emotional affair was now my fault for not being romantic enough. "So let me understand this," I said, setting down my fork. "You've been lying to me about where you go and who you're with because I don't buy you flowers enough? You're twisting what I'm saying." "No, I'm clarifying what you're saying. You're telling me that your behavior is justified because I've failed as a husband. I'm saying that relationships require effort from both people." I laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Effort? Like the effort I put in working 50 hours a week to pay for this house, your car, your girls' nights, and everything else you consider essential to your happiness? That kind of effort. Money isn't everything." "You're right. It's not. But it's pretty convenient how you only remember that when you're trying to justify treating me like garbage." Her mask was slipping now. The apologetic wife act was giving way to something uglier underneath. "I never treated you like garbage. I made one comment about you being my first option, and you've turned it into this massive betrayal." "One comment. Right. Let's ignore the months of secret meetings with men, the lies about where you've been, and the text messages about settling too young. Those were private conversations about our marriage with someone who's actively encouraging you to blow up your life, just like she did hers." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Maybe she has a point. Maybe I did settle too young. Maybe I never got the chance to figure out what I really wanted." "There it is," I said quietly. The truth finally comes out. What truth? That this isn't about me not buying you flowers or planning surprise dates. This is about you wanting to be single while keeping all the benefits of being married. Her face flushed red. That's not true, isn't it? You want the security of having a husband who pays the bills and fixes the sink, but you also want the excitement of flirting with strangers and feeling like you're 19 again. You don't understand what it's like to wonder if you've missed out on life. And you don't understand what it's like to work your ass off every day for someone who considers you expendable. We stared at each other across the kitchen table, the fancy dinner growing cold between us. This was the moment of truth, and we both knew it. "So what do you want me to do?" she asked, but her tone suggested she was asking out of frustration, not genuine interest in saving our marriage. "I want you to decide. Either you want to be married to me, or you want to be single and see what else is out there. But you don't get both. And if I choose you, what? I never get to go out with friends again. I become some prisoner in my own marriage. If you choose me, you stop lying. You stop seeking validation from other men. You stop treating our marriage like it's negotiable." I stood up and walked toward the doorway. "But honestly, based on this conversation, I'm not sure that's what you really want." "What's that supposed to mean?" I turned back to look at her. "It means that someone who really wanted to save their marriage wouldn't spend the entire conversation justifying why they needed to shop around for alternatives." "You're being impossible." "No, I'm being clear. Maybe for the first time in this entire relationship." I headed toward the stairs. "Let me know when you've made your decision. But understand that I'm making mine too." "What decision?" "Whether I want to stay married to someone who thinks I'm lucky to be her first choice." I left her standing in the kitchen with her untouched dinner and her wounded pride. Upstairs, I could hear her moving around, probably texting her friend about what an unreasonable monster I was being. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally seeing our relationship clearly. And what I saw wasn't pretty. The question now was whether she would see it too, or whether she'd double down on her victim narrative until there was nothing left to save. Sunday morning came with the sound of her phone buzzing nonstop. I could hear her whispering urgently in the bathroom, probably getting coaching from her divorced friend on how to handle her controlling husband. When she finally emerged, she had that look people get when they've convinced themselves they're the victim in a situation they created. "We need to talk," she announced, like she was calling a board meeting. "I'm listening. I've decided that if you can't handle me having a social life, then maybe we need to take a break." I almost smiled. After everything that had happened, she was trying to make this her decision. A break. Yes. Time apart to figure out what we both really want. Interesting. And where exactly are you planning to take this break? At your friend's place? Or maybe at that wine bar where you've been doing your research? Her confidence wavered slightly. "I have options." "I'm sure you do. But before you commit to anything permanent, there's something you should know." I walked to the kitchen counter and picked up a manila folder I'd placed there earlier that morning. Her eyes followed my movement with growing uncertainty. "Friday afternoon, while you were getting ready for your girls' night, I had a very productive conversation with someone." "What kind of conversation?" "The kind you have with a divorce attorney when you realize your marriage might be heading toward its expiration date." The color drained from her face. "You contacted a lawyer?" "I contacted the best divorce attorney in the city. Turns out, he's handled several cases involving social media evidence and emotional affairs. Very thorough guy." I opened the folder and pulled out several printed pages. "These are screenshots of all your text messages, Instagram posts, and social media activity from the past 3 months. Amazing what kind of pattern emerges when you lay it all out chronologically." She reached for the papers, but I held them back. "Don't worry, you'll get copies. But first, let me walk you through some highlights." I flipped to a page covered in printed text messages. "Here's where you tell your friend that marriage is just a piece of paper. Here's where you discuss strategy for meeting men at bars. And this one's my personal favorite, where you rate the guys you've met on a scale of 1 to 10. Those were private conversations. Private conversations about your marriage, which, last I checked, involves me." I turned to another page. "But this gets better. Did you know that your friend's ex-husband kept detailed records of her extracurricular activities? Turns out, judges are very interested in patterns of behavior when it comes to asset division." She was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious. Apparently, when someone demonstrates a pattern of seeking romantic alternatives while married, it can affect how courts view their commitment to the marriage." I closed the folder. "Fascinating stuff, really. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to educate you. See, While you were playing games and keeping your options open, I was doing something more productive. I was preparing for the possibility that you might choose those options over our marriage. I walked to the kitchen table and sat down, gesturing for her to do the same. She remained standing, probably because sitting would feel too much like accepting a position of weakness. Here's what else I learned. I continued. Our house is in both our names, but I've made every mortgage payment for the past 4 years. Your car is financed through my credit. Your health insurance comes through my job. Your gym membership, your phone, your credit cards, all connected to my income. What are you saying? I'm saying that while you've been treating me like your backup plan, you might want to consider what your life looks like without me as your primary financial plan. She finally sat down, her face pale. You're threatening me. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm presenting facts. You want to take a break? Fine, but breaks work both ways. That means no more joint checking account, no more credit cards that I pay off, no more insurance coverage, no more house that I maintain and mortgage that I service. You can't just cut me off financially. Actually, I can. We don't have kids. We don't have any joint debts beyond the mortgage. And according to my lawyer, separating finances during a trial separation is not only legal, it's recommended. I pulled out another set of papers. I've already opened a new checking account. Starting tomorrow, my paycheck goes there. I've also contacted our insurance company about removing you from my policy, effective next month. This is insane. You're blowing up our entire life over some text messages. No, you blew up our life when you decided I wasn't enough for you. I'm just responding appropriately to your decision. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the papers spread across the table. When she looked up, there was something different in her eyes. Not anger or defiance, but calculation. What if I said I was sorry? What if I promised to stop going out with the girls? Then I'd say you're missing the point entirely. What point? The point is that you've shown me who you really are. Someone who lies, who seeks validation from strangers, who treats her marriage like it's optional. Promising to behave better doesn't change the fundamental problem. Which is what? That you don't respect me. You don't value what we built together. And when things got a little routine, instead of working to improve our relationship, you started shopping for my replacement. She was crying now, but they weren't the manipulative tears from yesterday. These looked like genuine panic. I never meant for any of this to happen. Maybe not, but it did happen. And now we both have to live with the consequences of your choices. I stood up and gathered the papers. You said you wanted a break to figure out what you really want. Consider this your opportunity. You can have all the freedom you've been craving. Date whoever you want. Flirt with whoever you want. Live whatever life you think you're missing out on. But without any of the benefits of being married to you. Exactly. Welcome to being single again. I hope it's everything you dreamed it would be. I headed toward the stairs, but her voice stopped me. What if I don't want to break? What if I want to work on us? I turned back to look at her. Then you'll need to prove it. Not with words or promises or fancy dinners. With actions. Real, sustained, verifiable changes in behavior. Like what? Like cutting contact with the friend who's been encouraging you to blow up your marriage. Like complete transparency about where you go and who you're with. Like marriage counseling with someone who doesn't buy into the idea that emotional affairs are just harmless fantasies. And if I do all that, then maybe we can discuss whether there's anything left to save. But understand this, I'm not negotiating from a position of desperation anymore. You want to be married to me? Then be married to me. All in, no backup plans, no exit strategies. And if I can't do that, then you'll get to find out what life looks like when you're no longer anyone's first option. I left her sitting at the kitchen table with the evidence of her choices spread out in front of her. For the first time in months, I felt like I was back in control of my own life. The ball was in her court now. The question was whether she had the courage to play it, or whether she'd finally admit that the game was already over. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my home office when she knocked on the door. Not walked in like she used to, but actually knocked. That small gesture told me everything about how much had changed. "Can we talk?" she asked. She looked different. Tired, maybe even a little desperate. The confidence she'd carried during her girls' night adventures was nowhere to be found. "I'm listening." I ended my friendship with her. Completely. Blocked her on everything. I nodded, but didn't respond. Words were cheap, and I'd learned that lesson the hard way. I also canceled my social media accounts. All of them. Why? Because I realized you were right. I was using them to get attention from other men, and that's not fair to you or to our marriage. She sat down across from my desk, her hands folded in her lap, like a student meeting with the principal. I've been seeing a therapist downtown. She's helping me understand why I needed that validation so badly. And what have you learned? That I was scared. Scared of getting older, scared of missing out on experiences, scared that maybe I wasn't interesting enough to keep you interested. She paused, but mostly scared that I'd made the wrong choice by getting married so young. And now I realized that the wrong choice wasn't getting married young. It was almost throwing away the best thing in my life because I was too immature to appreciate what I had. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. She seemed genuine, but I'd been fooled before. What about the wine bar guy? The one you were excited to see? Her cheeks flushed red. Nothing happened. I mean, he asked for my number, and I almost gave it to him. But I didn't, and I never went back to that place. Almost doesn't count for much. You're right. But the fact that I even considered it should tell you how lost I was. How stupid I was being. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our backyard where we talked about planting a garden together someday. The question isn't whether you were stupid. The question is whether you've actually changed or whether you're just scared of losing your comfortable life. It's both, she said quietly. I'm scared of losing this life, but not because of the house or the financial security, because I'm scared of losing you. I turned back to face her. Then prove it. How? By understanding that this isn't about forgiveness or second chances. This is about building something completely new. The marriage we had before is over. If we're going to try again, it has to be as different people with different expectations. I understand. Do you? Because the woman who told me I was her first option doesn't get to come back. That person is gone. If you want to be married to me, you need to be someone who sees me as her only option. Not because you don't have others, but because you don't want them. She nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. I want to try. I want to be that person. Then we'll see. But understand that I'm not the same man who used to accept being taken for granted. I won't tolerate lies, games, or divided loyalty ever again. I know. And if you ever, even once, make me feel like I'm competing for your attention with strangers in bars, this conversation ends permanently. It won't happen. 6 months later, I can say that so far, she's kept her word. The marriage we're building isn't the same one we had before. It's more honest, more direct, and definitely more fragile. But it's also more real. She learned that being someone's first option isn't a privilege you get to take for granted. And I learned that sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to save what actually matters. The funny thing about becoming someone's last option is that it forces them to realize you might have been their best option all along. Some people figure that out in time. Others don't. I'm glad she figured it out. But I'm even more glad I figured out that I deserved better than being anyone's backup plan. These days, I'm nobody's first option. I'm their only option, and that makes all the difference.